In South Korea, the number of newly infected people with COVID-19 exceeds 7,000 every day, and the worst case is progressing, and fake news related to COVID-19 spreads. Fake news is a major obstacle to epidemic prevention, such as not being able to recognize the serious situation and refusing vaccination due to unproven anxiety. Comprehensive coverage of the Herald Economy on the 9th reveals various fake news related to COVID-19. A typical example is the fake news that Japan intentionally hides newly infected people. The number of new infections per day in Japan, which had reached 25,000 in August this year, has plummeted to around 100 this month. Rumors have begun to circulate around this that the Japanese government has raised the cost of PCR tests to a very high level in order to reduce the number of newly infected people. It is claimed that the burden of testing costs is the main factor in the decrease in new infections. Such an allegation spread at a fast pace with great response from government supporters who support the current Korean government's epidemic prevention system. Kim Young-won, a job-hunting student in his 20s, said, "Everyone knows that Japan is lying is not common sense." Park, a civil servant in his 40s, said, "Unlike other countries, only the South Korean government makes everything transparent. In fact, South Korea is the safest zone." However, this lacks credibility. It is a policy that Japan has maintained since the early days of COVID-19 last year to carry out PCR tests for a fee for the rest of the people, except for close contacts and people who are definitely symptomatic. If the number of new infections increases or is about the same, but the number of tests decreases, the positive rate of the COVID-19 PCR test should increase. However, the positive rate of Tokyo, which had reached 24% in August this year, had rather declined to 0.3% at the end of last month. In addition, the statistics of deaths, which cannot be manipulated numerically, are close to zero. Professor Jung Ian Mi, Department of Respiratory Medicine, Mokdong Hospital, Rikka Women's University, said, "In the case of Japan, vaccination was completed tightly in the 3 months after August, and the movement restrictions tightened from South Korea are the measures to prevent epidemics." In the case of South Korea, the supply and demand of vaccines in the early stages was uncertain, vaccinations were prolonged for a long time, and at a decisive time, we switched to with Corona. In fact, the amount of outdoor activities in Japan has definitely decreased compared to before COVID-19. An analysis of restaurants, cafes, shopping centers, etc. in Japan in the middle of last month showed that the number of visitors decreased by 35% compared to before the COVID-19 epidemic. On the other hand, in South Korea, the number of visitors to restaurants and other places increased by 13 to 14% compared to before the spread of COVID-19. Recently, there has been absurd fake news in the online community that PCR tests imitated the therapy of torturing slaves in ancient Egypt. In Gangwon-do and Yonggwol-gun, police have launched an investigation into the case of distributing fake news by distributing a leaflet saying COVID-19 vaccine is a poison. There is also fake news for pregnant women who have to be sensitive to COVID-19. One of the rumors is that if you inoculate with the vaccine during pregnancy, the components of the vaccine will accumulate in the ovaries and many gynecological diseases such as abnormal bleeding will occur. This is fake news that has not been proven in obstetrics and gynecology. In August of this year, the Korean Society of Obstetrics and Gynecology decided to recommend vaccination to pregnant women. Experts warned that the victims of such fake news were, after all, the people themselves. Professor Yoo Hyun Jae of the Faculty of Communication, Sogong University said, "When people are uneasy, fake news will increase rapidly, and there may be more fear than necessary collectively. Of course, everyone will suffer damage.